Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes, and with me is my partner in epistemological inquiry, Mr. Ken Kelly. How are you, Ken?
Good to be here. What does well, I can't say the word. What does that big long word mean?
Oh, I don't know. I'm going to have to look it up. I'm going to have to start again. I did know the theory of knowledge. Right, should we start again?
The theory of knowledge. I like that. Okay. No, I think we should leave it just as it is. So with that false start to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, I gladly bring you that we've got a really good action-packed episode for you today. We're going to be jumping into speaking about books, counselling books, psychotherapy books, the books that will accompany us along our journeys to become practicing counsellors. And Rory's going to be telling us about his book club. And then we're going to be going into theory with Rory. And it's an interesting one today because Rory is going to be covering the theory of empathy. Now, we've covered skills. We've covered empathy and skills, and we looked at idiosyncratic empathy. But there's a whole theoretical side that I'm very much looking forward to listening to. And then we're going to be looking in person-centered business today. We're going to be looking at the issues of taking payment as a counsellor, as a psychotherapist. When you're out there in practice and you're working with people that are really in a difficult position and you're putting your hand out and saying, yes, well, I'd love to hear what you have to bring, but give me some money, please. How can we do that? How can we take the sting out of that tail? So that's the business side of things. And then we're going to be looking at something important. We're going to be closing off by speaking about insurance as a practice counsellor, and of course, insurance while you're doing your placement as a student. Really important topics there. But I like that first topic, books. And I know this is dear to your heart, Rory. Hit us with books.
Well, I won't want to hit you with my books. It's so heavy, Ken. You might get concussion. But yeah, well, it's for those of you who've been following us on the Facebook page, and if you're listening to this on iTunes and you don't know what the heck we're talking about, go over to www.counsellingtutor.com. There's two L's in counselling, not the American spelling. And then just click on the link that says Facebook, and we have a closed Facebook group where students of counselling and psychotherapy come and share their experiences, and we share our experiences and the knowledge we have. And on that group, I have been running back end of last year, Saturday Book Club, where I review books, because I think, and I know Ken will agree with me as a former lecturer, it's really important that you get into the literature if you're studying counselling. It's great getting web links and websites and stuff like that, but the real knowledge, I think, is in a lot of the books, and some of them are quite hard to get into. However, we're running Saturday Book Club, and over the last few weeks, I've been teasing people with videos of packages arriving at Counselling Towers.
Oh, yes.
And it's the worst kept secret, actually, in the group, because I've been working with and reaching out to publishers of academic books, and they've just been great, Ken. They've just been absolutely fantastic and so supportive of what we're doing. And they're sending us free books. They're sending us free evaluation books. So I'm going to be reviewing those books, but more to the point, I'm going to be giving them away in competitions. So these are expensive textbooks. I'm going to be giving them away. We're going to be running competitions as the academic year starts. I can't wait. I like
that. I love that. And I think, the whole point of counselling tutors is to deliver value to people, you who are studying counselling or psychotherapy. And I think that what better value than the book club, having the review of the books, and you're going to see the books reviewed that are on your recommended reading list. Go and look at that book club and make your way through maybe some of the back reviews, and you can win a book. Well, it doesn't get better than that, does it? I think that is great value. And I remember when I was studying, I'm not a book person, or I didn't think I was a book person. Here's the interesting thing. I think I had a self-concept that I wasn't a book person because I struggle. I struggle with literacy. I struggle with spelling, and I struggle with reading. I sometimes have to go over the sentence again and again. So I figured to myself that I didn't like reading because in school I was reading about boring stuff. But when I actually found myself getting lost in the counselling books, I actually started realizing I do actually enjoy it, but sometimes I found it really difficult to, I guess, decode the language. Sometimes I found the language, Rory, was a little bit highfalutin. I don't know if there's such a word as highfalutin. That's my word. You can have it, highfalutin. It's just big words, and I don't know if you. I know in book club part of the deal is kind of decoding that. Rory, you're very good at that.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, it has to be. It has to be simple for me to understand it. So, yeah, decoding it and talking about theories is really what we do in Counselling Tutor. We take theories that on the face of it can look quite complex, and we break them down and try to make them really accessible. And top tip, Ken, for reading academic books, read it from the back. So you start at the back. There's no plot in an academic book. You're not going to find out who murdered the vicar. Okay. What you do is with academic book, and this is the tip I'll give you, is you get the book and you turn it so it's the opposite way to the way you'd usually read it, and you go until you get into the list of topics that's covered. And then what you do is when you get something, studying something, you're doing empathy as I'm doing today, you go down and you go A, B, C, that's D, isn't it? D, E. See, I'm getting there, Ken. E. Yep. And then empathy, and then it tells you which chapter it's in, and you go to that chapter and you read that bit. I think the danger with reading academic textbooks from the front to the back is that by the time you get to the back, you've because there's no plot. Maybe this is just the way I read. You kind of miss out a bit. So an academic textbook should be about like a laser focus on what you are studying. So you should be able to open it up and go, I'm looking at empathy. I want to know about empathy. And then when you get your next topic, you can go on to your next topic. Now, if you are the sort of person who reads front to back, that's fine. You can do that as well. But generally speaking, I say to my students, don't start front to back because it can be a bit overwhelming. Just find the topic you're studying. And then as the jigsaw pieces come into place, it'll all become apparent.
I like that. Yes. I like that. That's a good way of doing it. And what I found myself doing for my studies, and here another top tip, this is one of Ken's top tips with books, is map out where the interesting information is or where the important information is. So if you know things like empathy, you know you're going to be covering that, so we'll use that as the example today, and you're reading some kind of a theoretical textbook and you come across a paragraph on empathy, make some kind of a marker in there. I use little coloured post-it notes, I had them everywhere, and write it down somewhere so you've maybe got a list of where you might go and find the various topics. And I remember when I was doing my assignments, I had tables full of books and I'd pick them up and just flip through to the bit that I needed. And they very much become reference books as you're doing your assignments, where you can pull a bit from here, a little bit from there, and then of course reference it correctly, which we often see incorrectly done, don't we, Rory? There's a whole episode in that, there is.
We do, yeah. And don't be afraid to write in textbooks. I mean, I can remember writing in my textbooks and peers of mine going, "What are you doing?" Like, I'd deface the crown jewels or something. And they're your books. That's the thing. They're your books. You bought them. You own them. And if you want to put a note in under something to help remember, write it in. I write in my books all the time. It means it's very difficult for me to sell them on, but because obviously they've got my scribblings in. But occasionally I do buy second-hand books, and people have helpfully scribbled in stuff, and I look at it and I go, "Oh, that's an interesting idea," because I'm getting someone else's idea as well. So when you buy second-hand books, if people have scribbled in them, it's very likely that they're putting their thinking stream in as well. So that can be interesting. But yeah, writing books in the margins, make comments. That's fine.
Agreed.
You can't deface your own books.
No, I agree. You need those highlighters, set of highlighters, underline things, highlight stuff, make it stand out for you, put post-it notes in with big arrows, and then use them. And, I sometimes see where people are selling their books on. I wonder why. I still have all of my books from when I was studying, and I've now been in practice a good few years, and I still refer back to them. These are things you go back to again and again and again. They don't get old for me, and the information. And it's interesting. I can go back to a book and read a bit of it again, especially Rogers's books, and it's completely different. The meaning is different depending on where I am in my journey. Love books. So book club is the message here. And when is book club, Rory?
It goes out at roughly 12 o'clock UK time. So I have to upload it, and it depends how quick Facebook processes the video and puts it online. But 12 o'clock, we're encouraging people to visit our supporting publishers' websites and look at the whole books that they do. So I'll be putting links in there. But I've got a whole host of them, and they're really good, Ken. I've got some really good books. The first one, I'll leak it out because this podcast will have gone out after the book club is launched, is Standards and Ethics in Counselling by Tim Bond. Just a seminal piece of work that everybody who is either thinking of becoming a therapist, maybe at the end of the level 3, starting into level 4 or higher education degrees, they should have it. I've got my copy. It's dog-eared. It's worn out, and I'm going to have to give this copy away, it hurts, Ken. It hurts.
A crisp new copy of Tim Bond. I can feel your pain there, Rory. And of course, Tim Bond, the contributor to the new BACP ethical framework that Rory covered so beautifully in the live lecture just a few weeks ago. For those of you that are members of the Counselling Study Resource, I'm going to mention Counselling Study Resource as I often do, Rory, because I really believe in it. And we were talking about books and how books, it's about getting the information you need at the time. It's called just-in-time learning. You don't have to read everything. You go to the section or the chapter you need at the time you need it. And the same is true of the Counselling Study Resource. That has been divided down into just what you need at the time when you need it. It's beautifully laid out. It's beautifully indexed. So definitely have a look at that. If you're already a member of the Counselling Study Resource, you'll know that value. If you're not and you're studying counselling or psychotherapy, go to counsellingtutor.com. Go check out the Counselling Study Resource. You will be so glad you did. Sticking with theory, of course, and we've been on the theory of books, a really interesting angle, I guess, you're taking on what is widely regarded as a skill, the skill of empathy. But you're looking at the theoretical side of that in Theory with Rory today. I
am. I'm looking at Einfühlung, my German Mancunian translation, Einfühlung, which basically means empathy. And that was the starting position of empathy, where it was translated from the German into the English. And then there's so many different theories. So I'm going to do a tour of theories of empathy. And I thought of this idea. I had a bit of a look, and now I've got literally a whole notepad of jottings because it is such a big subject. I never realised just how big a subject it is. So I'm going to be giving a guided tour, Ken, of empathy.
And on that note, it's Theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees-Oakes.
The term empathy has found common currency in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. A short of therapeutic shorthand, meaning being in the client's frame of reference, experiencing the world as they see and feel it. Our current idea of empathy comes from two sources. The first, the Greek term pathos, which means emotion, feeling, suffering or pity. The second root is from the German word Einfühlung, meaning into or in feeling, and was first coined by the German philosopher Robert Vischer in his PhD dissertation entitled On the Optical Sense of Form, a Contribution to Aesthetic, published in 1873. Vischer used the word to describe the human capacity to enter into literature and art, sensing the emotional content the artist or the author wanted to convey. In 1909, Edward Bradford Titchener, a British psychologist, translated the German word Einfühlung into empathy, and the rest is history. Or is it? Through the years, many psychologists have tried to define the meaning of the word as it relates to the human condition made between one and another. In an article published in the Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology in 1956, psychologist Carl Rogers described 6 as necessary and sufficient conditions for therapeutic change to occur. In this quote, taken from the article, he describes empathy as the 5th condition is that the therapist is experiencing an accurate, empathic understanding of the client's awareness of his own experience, to sense the client's private world as if it were your own, but without ever losing the as-if quality. This is empathy and seems essential to therapy. Around the same time, Charles B. Truax and Robert H. Karkoff, American researchers in psychotherapy and collaborators in Rogers' humanistic ideas, produced what became known as the Karkoff and Truax scale. The scale, in 5 sections, gives a guide to how to measure empathy with examples. Stage 1 signifies discrepancies
between what the client has said and what the therapist reflects back. The high point, 5, is where the therapist demonstrates accurate empathy to the point where they move away from a professional facade and can really enter the client's frame of reference, experience and accurately reflect back not just the narrative but the feelings connected to it. The scale is still used today as a guide to both support and measure students' empathic responses. Empathy can be broadly broken down into 4 main ideas. Affective empathy, also called emotional empathy, is how we are affected by another's emotional or mental state, and it also is about how we experience our own process. Cognitive empathy is the ability to understand another's perspective or mental state. Receptive empathy is the capacity to listen and understand what is being said by the client, and expressed empathy is the capacity to convey back to a person what you have understood. And the skills needed to have expressed empathy are using appropriate language to reflect or reword what you've understood or has been said, an ability to match tone of voice and body language, which leaves no doubt that you are appreciating the client's feeling and mood. And an empathic response may take the form of repeating or rewording something a client has said, summarising a number of things that have been said, or repeating a single significant keyword out of many that has been said by the client. British researchers Dave Mearns and Mick Cooper, well-known luminaries in the world of counselling and psychotherapy, explored empathy in what they termed as relational depth. In their seminal book, Working at Relational Depth, published in 2005, Cooper and Bond explored this idea by describing it as an engagement between two people in which each person is fully real with the other and able to understand and value the other's experience as a very high level. So what other perspectives are there on empathy? The world of neuroscience, which studies the brain's structure and function, has developed its own perspective on empathy. In October 2013, a study published in the Journal of Neuroscience by researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Germany identified that humans have an innate tendency to be self-centered and consequently lack empathy. However, they also identified that part of the brain, called the right supramarginal gyrus, recognises this lack of empathy and auto-corrects. They also note that if this part of the brain does not function properly, or we have to make quick decisions, the ability to empathise and be compassionate is greatly reduced. It is this part of the brain that distinguishes our own empathic processes and that of others. Which brings us to the final piece in the empathy jigsaw, mirror neurons. Let me ask you, have you ever seen someone kick a ball or prick their finger and you feel just exactly what they are feeling as if you're in their shoes? Ever held a baby and pulled out your tongue only for them to respond in the same way? Science may have come up with the answer. Almost 20 years ago, while observing monkey brains, Italian researchers noted that certain brain cells activated when a monkey performed an action. So if monkey A was eating a banana, part of their brain cells would activate. However, if monkey B, who did not have a banana, observed this, the exact same part of the brain would activate. This fruit-based empathy led to the discovery of mirror neurons, cells in the brain which replicated another's feeling. The breakthrough was hailed by some in the scientific community as the cornerstone of human empathy, although some in the scientific world still remain sceptical. Whatever the scientific or philosophical basis of empathy, one aspect of it cannot be underestimated: the sense one gets of being heard, understood and validated when one human being enters another's perceptual world. The power of empathy can be both liberating and transformational. It is one of the greatest human gifts one can give to another.
That was so different and so I'm so grateful, because I've always just looked at empathy as a skill, but listening to the theory, it gives me a different view on it, and hearing how attunement or those kind of extra ingredients is really interesting. I'm very grateful for that. Thank you, Rory.
Oh yeah. I found the whole thing really, really interesting, and now we're going to look at a bit of a vexed topic, and one that people sometimes struggle, especially when you go into private practice, in person-centered business skills we can, and that is taking payment. Can be difficult, isn't it? If you've worked for pro bono for free, I do know what that means, pro bono, it means for free. If you work for free for a long time, maybe in your placement, working for a charity, and then you go into private practice and you're making your living out of it, and you deserve to because you've worked hard for your qualifications. How do we take payment? That's the tricky one, isn't it, Cam?
Person-centered business with Kenneth Kelly.
Today's topic in person-centered business is taking payment, and it can be tricky, as counsellors, as psychotherapists, we're working with clients with pretty heavy, weighty material at times, and popping in the "could I have some money please" at the end of a session can feel really inappropriate, specifically when the client may have tears rolling down their face after having delved into something that they've never shared with another human being ever in their life before. So today's topic was raised by a lovely lady called Sarah Carr, and Sarah helps us out with the show notes for our podcast. So she did the show notes to this very podcast that you're listening to right now. And Sarah actually bobbed me an email over saying, just been having a think about how doctors and nurses also are in helping professions and they get paid. But it feels a little different for us as counsellors because the counsellors in private practice have to actually get the money from the client, whereas doctors and nurses are paid by an organisation. Even in private healthcare, there's going to be a separate office and a separate department to deal with the payment processing. So the actual professional that is client-facing doesn't have to say, "Could I get paid, please?" And it's a great, great topic, and that's kind of sparked the topic for today. So the first thing that I wanted to look at here is you are offering, if in private practice, a professional service to the client. When they come and they engage in that professional service, they will have an understanding that it is a paid service. You will have that, hopefully, and I implore you to look to your contract, within your contract. You're going to contract how often they come, where they come to, what the sessions are going to look like, what happens within those sessions. And part of your contracting is how they pay for those sessions. So it is actually written down. So they do know that they are coming into a paid service. So that is understood. But it's about how can we reduce the sting of that. But I guess the thing to look at is it you that feels uncomfortable about asking for money? Because if it is your discomfort, it's well worth looking through self-development, as we do with other aspects of our life and practice, at the financial side and saying, why might I feel uncomfortable? It is, after all, a contracted service where the client knows they're paying. So that's one aspect definitely to look at, and that's for you and your personal development. The other aspect, of course, is how can we take the sting out of it for the client? There are a number of ways. So I would give you a couple of suggestions. If you are taking cash within your practice. So the client is coming and at the end of the session, maybe they are handing over cash bills. Well, a way to kind of take the sting out of that and make it a little more professional and smooth, as it were, is to prepare your invoice or your receipt in advance. Prepare that either with a bookkeeping software, or if you wished to, you could just get a little receipt book and just write that out. As long as you're recording it, of course, for taxation purposes, that is fine. And pop that into an envelope and put the client's name on the envelope. And that removes that need to actually ask for money. You can get to the end of your session and just before the client leaves, you can say, "Oh, and I have this for you," and hand them the envelope with their name on it. And of course, they will know that that means that it's time to pay, and that will prompt them to pay. Because it's very easy for the client to forget to pay, specifically if they've been delving into that difficult material. The last thing on their mind is paying a bill at the end. They really are emotionally caught up in where they've been. So a little memory jog that maybe is very respectful and very professional is just that envelope with the client's name on it. This day and age, very few people carry cash with them. I'm not saying nobody does, and I'm not saying that cash is not easily available, but fewer and fewer people are carrying cash because we don't have the need to. We can walk into a restaurant, a cafe, a coffee shop, and we can order what we wish to have and leave without having to take any cash out, just using a card and touching it against a machine or popping our pin in. So with fewer people carrying cash, are there ways that we can make our practice cash free so that we're not having to take cash? And of course, there are ways. The first way of doing this is called a merchant account. Now, what a merchant account is, it's a credit card processor. So if you go into a store and you buy something, that credit card machine is being processed through what is called a merchant account. It's separate to a bank account. They process the credit cards and then they will put the funds into the bank account after a short period of time. Now, getting a merchant account is quite a rigmarole. There are security checks. There's a whole pile of compliance steps that you would need to go through on your website if you're taking payments on your website. And if you're not taking payments on your website, if you're taking it over the telephone or something, there are also compliance steps you need to go through. And they're there to protect the clients, to protect them against fraud. For instance, if you're taking a credit card details over the telephone, where's that being inputted into? Are you writing that down? What happens to that piece of paper? So it's all about protecting the client's details, I guess, at the end of the day. So I guess that a merchant account would be a good fit for a larger size practice who is taking a lot of credit card payments, because there is a cost associated to that. So you want to be processing quite a few credit card transactions to make that worthwhile. But then, of course, you can take card in person with the client there, or you can take payments over your website if you have that built-in e-commerce built into your website. There are easier ways to take credit cards. It's a little bit more expensive, but if you go through to PayPal, which is paypal.com, you can open an account for free and you can start taking payments on your website. You can take payments from clients if they have a PayPal account and they've got money in their PayPal account they can pay, or they can use their credit or debit card. There is a cost to that you will pay as the merchant or the operator, but you can certainly do that. And through PayPal, you can even make little buttons that you can put on your website. Really easy to do. You log into your account and you set them up and you put your fee in there and it generates a button that says pay now. You take the little bit of code, you stick it on your website. The button's on your website. When a client clicks on that, they're able to pay for their service with their debit or credit card. And the reason that you're able to do that is when they click on that button, it actually takes them through to PayPal. So you don't need to worry about the security and the compliance issues that you would if you were using a merchant account. So that's another way of electronically taking funds, and they can pay in advance. They can pay for a batch of sessions, whatever you set up, and link to that button that you place on your website. And then through PayPal as well, you can also order a little card reading machine. So you can take credit cards payments in person using a little handheld credit card device that also fits onto your phone. There's also one that you can plug into your mobile phone that will work as well through PayPal. So a number of options there, cash-free options available. And I'm going to share one more with you. It's called Stripe.com. Stripe.com is similar to PayPal. I guess the difference being that you can't have the client can't have a Stripe account and pay you from that. They would always pay with a credit or debit card, but it's just a really quick and easy thing to set up. You can set it up within about 10 minutes and you can take credit and debit cards. So that is Stripe.com if you want to have a look at that. So there you go. There's a number of different options of how you can take payment in your practice. And I guess at the end of the day, this is about choice. We offer autonomy to the client, and it's about their choice and them leading the way. It's their therapy. So maybe we can offer them some different options on how they pay for that as well, and still maintain professionalism. One last thing I just want to throw in right at the end here. If you get a professional bookkeeping system, something like QuickBooks, and you can look online again, the great specials on that. It's not expensive, quickbooks.com. That is a great way to manage your books, take payments, generate invoices. It can do all of that for you. But I also put it to you that you need to look at the ethical consideration of confidentiality. If you are putting a client's name and details into a bookkeeping system and then handing that over to your accountant, so with that data being seen. So there's considerations there. So yes, it's a sticky topic, I guess, taking money from clients. But if we are in the business of counseling, you're in private practice, we do need to take that payment. So have a think about the different methods that are available, maybe do a little bit of research on that and see what would fit best for your practice.
Well, that was really, really helpful, Ken. And what I do like is the idea that there are many different routes to taking payment, and also that what you're so good at, if I may say so, that person-centeredness of it, the fact that, thinking about the client, putting the client first in a way that that you can earn your living, we can earn our living, which is right and proper, but also that the client isn't kind of thrust into a different frame of reference when they're leaving the therapy room. So it's about choice, isn't it? And the ethical framework talks about autonomy, and you're really building that in giving a choice of payment, Ken.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so. We speak in counselling about empowering the clients and giving them the choice, and certainly in person-centred, that it's them that direct it. Yet when we kind of have just a very rigid way that people can pay, are we giving them that choice? And is it because we don't know that there are other alternate methods? So interesting topic, and of course, join in this conversation. Let's go onto the Facebook group and have a chat of what your feelings are towards that. But moving on now, something really important, and I guess a serious side of what it is that we do as counsellors, psychotherapists, and even as a student, and that's the insurance side of things. We need to be insured. It's a requirement.
Absolutely, Ken. It's an ethical imperative now in the BACP ethical framework. When I started, it wasn't even kind of discussed to any level. But yes, insurance. And I'm going to share just a little couple of stories from my practice experience about why we're insured. Everybody thinks that insurance is about when something goes wrong and somebody sues you, you can trundle off to your insurance company and they will kind of, if you get found guilty, they will pay the bill. Rather like if you've had a car accident, you bump into someone, it's your fault, the insurance pays out, and then you have to pay more insurance. And that really isn't the way to look at counselling insurance. Counselling insurance is another support pillar in your practice. It's another support pillar. And a few years ago, I received what every therapist kind of dreads, a communication from the police who wanted my notes, and it went back and forth and back and forth. And I said they had to get a court order unless they got the client's consent, and it went back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, I got written client consent, so that's an important thing there to release the notes. And before I sent them, I phoned my insurance company up, and my insurance company said, and I quote, "What have you done and what have you said?" And I've said, well, I've not done anything. I said, and I've checked that the police are the police, and I've compiled my notes, but I've got release from the client, and we had a whole conversation because this was a young person, a whole conversation about Fraser competencies, about this, that, and the other, and they were really, really supportive, Ken. They were really supportive, and they said, "Okay, we'll come back to you. Don't do anything until we come back to you." And I went to bed. About a day later, I got a phone call saying, "Okay, these are the steps you should be taking." And then I checked that, because I didn't take their word for it. I checked that with the BACP, and they said exactly the same thing. And the key thing is here, I felt supported in my practice. I paid my money every year. I pay it on the dot every year. But I feel supported in my practice. And that is part of insurance. So, if you are insured and you do get someone who's either sequestering your notes or any area where you think your insurance company might be involved, give them a ring.
100%. And it may well be that you are going back into your second year of level 4 now, and that you'll soon be going and taking those first steps into doing your placement, going into practice. And you're going to need that support, and you're going to definitely need that insurance. And I guess when looking around, there are more than just one insurance supplier in the counselling area. So have a look around, go online, put in counselling insurance, have a look in the Therapy Today if you are a member of the BACP or a student member, and you'll see the advertisements there. And what I always suggest is give them a call and ask them what they can do for you, because you've got some choice here. Don't just pick the first one you see. Give them a call and ask how they will support you. Some of the insurers I know actually provide CPD, free of charge, continuing professional development, where they'll give little courses that you can do. So you can definitely get something out of your insurer. And I think that Rory's painted a really good picture that it's more than just being something in the background, a mechanism that kicks in when you're in trouble. It can be there to support you as well. And I know that when you phone the BACP, they have their ethics department, and you can have a chat with them. But the BACP will will not always take a stand on stuff. They're there to give you the information, and they do that very well, but they're not there to take a stand. They're not going to be doing that. But your insurance company are more likely to take more of a stand, and they're going to, of course, want to give you the best information that's going to be viable to you at that time. And it gives you a balance. It gives you two places that you can look, I guess.
Yeah, and one final observation on insurance. If you've got insurance and part of your placement is working with children, you make sure you read the insurance agreement very, very carefully. I read mine, and I found a clause in it to say that parents could have access to all the information on my notes without consent. And what I did was I phoned them up and I said, I'm not happy with this because this goes against Fraser guidelines and certain parts of the ethical framework. And they actually put a clause in mine. When I was working in the school, they actually wrote a separate clause. Now, interestingly enough, when I came to regain my insurance, apart from them asking me what happened about the notes that I had to release, they were very, very, very careful before they took me on again. Said, what happened, Rory? You know, what happened about the police notes? So I explained what happened there. I'm not going to go into that for areas of confidentiality. But when I got the insurance schedule, which is what they call it, I looked down and actually they'd written in, not exactly what I'd put in, but they'd re-amended their insurance schedule.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're working with young people, completely different ball game. Completely
100%.
different ball game. So read that schedule, and if you don't understand it, get someone who does understand it to explain it to you. And I'm not being rude there because it is in quite kind of legalistic language.
100%. So it's a massive lesson there. Remember, it is a legal document. It's a contractual document that you hold with your insurer. Read over it. And if you don't understand it, a supportive insurer, you can give them a call and they'll talk you through what you need to know there. They're there to help you understand it. And I guess if I was to leave you with one final thing, I know we've touched on this before, but I'm going to bring it again because we are talking about insurance. If you're going into placement and your placement says, well, don't worry, we've got insurance that protects us. Go and get your own insurance. This is your practice, and there are situations that could arise. There is a possibility that if something did come up where you needed your insurance within a placement, and the placement turned around and says, "Well, actually, we agree with the complaining client," for example, just taking a wild example here, you don't have a leg to stand on. Get your own insurer. Make sure you and your practice are insured, irrespective of whether your placement has insurance as well. If they do, that's great. You've got two umbrellas over your head, but have your own insurance, because then you decide when you call upon that insurance, whereas when you're in an agency, it's them who decides when they activate or call on their insurance.
Absolutely, Ken. The old adage of he who pays the piper calls the tune comes to mind. And, you know, if you're working in an agency, the insurer is working for the agency. If you've got insurance and it's for you, the insurance is working for you. And there have been cases a few years ago where a placement insurer refused point blank to activate their insurance and left the therapist, the student therapist, high and dry. And the other thing is that the insurer will argue the case. Well, mine will. So I'll talk about my insurer. I don't know if all insurers do. Will argue the case because what you're buying is professional indemnity insurance. In other words, if you're sued because people perceive that you're not doing your job properly. But what it doesn't cover you for usually is public liability, where if a slate falls on someone's head outside the practice. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I spoke to my insurer a few years ago. They said they'd be surprised how many organizations try and push the public liability on to the individual worker.
Yeah.
And by having insurance, they'll depending on which insurance you have and who you're with, they'll fight that case for you as well.
It's interesting, you know, it really, really is. And here's the thing, you know, counseling insurance, psychotherapy insurance is really inexpensive. I'm speaking about here in the UK because that's all I'm able to reference. And I'm comparing it to maybe other sectors that you may work in. It is really not that expensive at all. I say that because I do work in other sectors as well. And the insurance in some of the sectors I work in is, whoa, it is ludicrous, I tell you. When compared to what we pay as counsellors and psychotherapists, it's well worth every penny. It's a great peace of mind for you. And again, at the end of the day, it's for our clients as well.
Absolutely, Kim. Absolutely. Well, with that in mind, that brings us to the end of the podcast.
It does.
And as always, stay grounded, stay safe. And I'm going to read a book saying don't use big words unless you actually know the meaning.
I'm going to suggest head on over to our Facebook group. Come and carry on the conversation. It's easy to find. Go to Facebook and put in Counselling Tutor, and we're right there. Knock on the door, and we will welcome you in. We've got close on 3,000 members of our community now, and it's a pretty lively place to be. As always, pop on over to counsellingtutor.com. That is our mother website, and that's where you'll find the show notes for today's episode. Just go click on podcast tab and go on to episode number 19. It's been great having you here, and I look forward to next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.